Meet Kim, just another salaryman caught in the endless shuffle of jobs. After graduation, he bounced from one company to the next, each boss tougher than the last. Now, the clock's ticking, his train's about to leave the station. So he bolts, heart pounding, racing against time. He arrives at the office with only 5 seconds left to clock in, slamming his hand on the gate just in the nick of time. Come lunchtime, he's clueless about what to order. After burning through a mountain of discount vouchers, he finally scores a meal. Stuffed and satisfied, he sneaks in a quick game of League of Legends before work. But then, the boss walks in. Quick as lightning, he shuts the game down. When the boss passes, he dares to reopen it. But this boss's suspicious gaze keeps darting back and forth. Kim has to dance on the edge of discovery with ninja-like finesse. Evening hits, workday's over, and he's ready to bolt home only to be stopped cold by the boss. The order, submit. Tomorrow's work slides right now. But Kim argues it's due Wednesday. What's the rush? Does the boss think he won't survive till then? Plus, if the deadline's so tight, shouldn't overtime pay come with it? When threatened with the sack, Kim stands tall. Fire me then, but don't forget the overtime pay. Otherwise, I'll see you in court. His cool confidence and sharp wit make him the office heartthrob, not just a daydream. Back at his desk, the world dims until only his computer screen glows. Suddenly, his phone buzzes with a message. A text invites him to test his future fortune. Clumsy as ever, he drops his phone into the trash bin and then, like magic, golden envelopes burst forth, pulling him right into the garbage heap. When he wakes, he's face to face with his old buddy, Maduong. Voices urge him to hurry to class. No one's covering attendance for him. Looking around, he realizes he's back in his freshman dorm at university. Memories flood in of a certain professor, seemingly easygoing but cunning as a fox by year's end. Anyone missing attendance would fail the course. Now that he's back, Kim plans to seize this second chance. Suddenly, a system pops up, knocking him off his feet. It's called Fortune. Shift. This system grants him capital to start building his fortune. Glancing at the funds, he's thrilled to see 50,000 dong magically appear. But he hasn't yet read the system's rules at set intervals. More capital will be provided. He must invest it wisely, no wasting allowed. After each cycle, profits and losses are calculated and converted into his personal assets. In other words, win or lose, he'll get money. The system even creates a conversion rate between profits and losses. If he loses, the money he gains is 100 times the amount he'd earn if he won. Kim's excitement skyrockets. Because here's the twist, he doesn't have to win to make money. The system asks him to pick a legal industry to invest in. No shady business allowed. The forbidden activities are clearly spelled out. He realizes that only serious investments that intentionally lose are allowed, while any dark, twisted schemes are banned. Given some thinking time, the system grants him a moment to plan his next move. After scrolling through his phone, Kim realized the gaming industry was often filled with pointless projects, usually leading to losses. Yet, he chose to dive headfirst into game development. He notified the system of his decision to enter this world. The system let him name his company, but warned him never to reveal its existence to any AI. He promised to keep the secret. Then, the system gave him 14 days to create a game before vanishing. Suddenly, Maduong returned. Kim asked him for tips on game programming. Maduong introduced an easy game development software with ready-made templates, making the process straightforward. Without hesitation, Kim rushed to the library to start coding. His plan to craft the most boring game ever was so dull it would make players quit and drive him into losses. He even bought a car model for it. He placed the car on a desert racetrack, added a day-night cycle, and created a racing game complete with rankings. He heard the game description announcements and pondered how long to make the race. So, He stretched the finish line ridiculously far to bore players quickly. Instead of pricing it high, he set the game at just 1 coin just to annoy some rich folks. Meanwhile, in the present, the boss was furious Bui Kiem had vanished at a crucial moment. Calling him only led to hearing his phone ringing inside a trash bin, which made the boss even angrier. The next morning, Ma Duong brought Bui Kiem lunch. Bui Kiem checked the game and saw 0 downloads. Since it was a day off, the whole office decided to play around together. They invited Bui Kiem into the game. He declined, saying he'd stayed up late and needed sleep. The team jumped in and got mercilessly wrecked by enemies. Ma Duong was the weakest link, constantly making mistakes that wiped them out. Seeing the gang still so weak gave Bui Kiem peace of mind to sleep. The noise was chaotic, but strangely familiar, reminding him of his past life. Back when he started out, life was dull and joyless, no time for games. But now, things were different. He could lie around and still make a fortune. He pondered what he would do with the money soon to come. Meanwhile, a blogger known for roasting trash games lived a lazy life. After making a cup of instant noodles, he complained about hardly getting AI bookings for blog content. Bored, he browsed the game shop for a trash game to roast and surprisingly stumbled upon Bui Kiem's creation. Giant in Manan action. He jumped into the game without any tutorial and just played while driving. His kettle boiled, distracting him and causing a loss. He tried again but paused mid-game. Frustrated, he seriously plugged in his controller to focus, but repeated failures only fueled his anger. Hours passed as he tried to beat the frustrating game. The more he played, the more annoyed he became, trying to convince himself it was work. He downed a bottle of water and dived into a furious grind. Just when he was about to quit, a message appeared. "Don't you want to see the final reward?" It pulled him back in, and hours slipped by as he drove and reflected on life. His mind cleared just in time to cross the finish line. Joy burst through him like a harvest festival. After 8 hours, he finally beat the game. But the reward, a cold message congratulating him for wasting 8 hours of his precious life. The next day at class, Bui Kiem asked about the system's accounting. With over 11 days left, he overheard classmates gossiping about his 8-hour-long game. Though they called it trash, the game was strangely addictive. Curious. He skipped class, rushed to the dorm, and saw the game had over 10,000 downloads. Watching closely, he discovered an AI was behind the game's trending status. Ma Duong revealed it was a blogger. Bui Kiem watched the blogger's roasting video, which exposed all the game's frustrating flaws and its ridiculous ending. Yet, despite the harsh critique, people kept downloading, hoping a secret ending would unlock after beating it 3 times. Bui Kiem had to come clean on the shop. This was junk. No secrets to find. Surprisingly, players forgave him. They already expected trash. Ma Duong downloaded it too, raging and cursing the 7 virtues behind this game. Bui Kiem felt the insults like punches, but he was equally frustrated he'd made the game so no one would play. In the following days, the game's downloads soared past 200,000. Though revenue hit 70,000 coins, Bui Kiem only received 700 after cutbacks. The system congratulated him. His product had outperformed 90% of competitors. Then, it announced a capital boost from 50,000 to 300,000 coins. Losing became harder now, but he gained 30 more days to invest. Back in his room, Bui Kiem vowed to spend every last coin of the 300,000. Burning with frustration, he rallied the whole team for a game of League of Legends. The result, Bui Kiem couldn't carry the team alone thanks to the deadweight Ma Duong. Ma Duong was always the reason for their losses, constantly farming minions even during fights. Everyone blamed him, but Ma Duong retorted that Bui Kiem farmed plenty too. If Bui couldn't carry, no one could. Suddenly, Bui Kim realized his own smarts made him unable to craft a terrible game to lose money. Ma Duong's incompetence was exactly the wild card he needed. That night, while Ma Duong slept, Bui Kim sneaked up and scared him into a loud scream. The next day at school, Ma Duong kept avoiding him, unnerved by Bui Kim's intense stares. At the cafeteria, all eyes were on them, prompting Ma Duong to ask what Bui Kim wanted. He bluntly said he wanted to convince everyone they had some kind of relationship. No beating around the bush. Bui Kim needed Ma Duong's help to make games. Ma Duong hesitated, complaining game development cost time and money. But Bui Kim revealed he already had 300,000 coins in capital. Yet the trashier it was, the more people loved it. Meanwhile, a big company had their eye on Bui Kim's unexpectedly viral game, recognizing his potential. So, Ma Yang brought back a pile of programming books, but honestly, they were mostly useless since AI now builds games through apps. Still, since the books were already bought, returning wasn't an option. Well, might as well read them then. That night, Ma Yang dozed off after reading just a few lines, which only made Bui Kim more excited. The next morning, Bui Kim woke early, deep in thought about what kind of game to make and what story it should tell. Then, he checked out popular mobile games and noticed a flood of card games themed on the Three Kingdoms. Making a game like that would be easier to compete with others. He woke Ma Yang to get to work. Together, they decided to make a Three Kingdoms card game. Bui Kim planned to throw tons of money into redesigning the characters, refusing to settle for cheap stock models. Later, over a meal, they joked about distorting the Three Kingdoms characters to the point players would rant and refund. But according to Bui Kim, this distortion was pure creativity. Ma Yang hadn't fully read the Three Kingdoms yet, but that was fine, it gave more room for wild ideas. So he started throwing out ridiculous concepts about the characters that made your heart ache. But to Bui Kim, those were exactly the ideas he needed. Meanwhile, a big gaming company noticed Bui Kim's small team was diving into mobile games and preparing to launch a Three Kingdoms card game just like theirs. Bui Kim couldn't sleep, buzzing with excitement. He grabbed his laptop, intent on finding an AI to generate character models, and he found exactly the figure he needed. Later, Ma Yang and Bui Kim met in the cafeteria to strategize. Ma Yang suggested turning the generals into women, but Bui Kim shut that down immediately. He didn't want to break their iconic images too much and lose their uniqueness. In reality, he just didn't want to attract pervy buyers who jump in just to buy those female characters, causing trouble for both of them. So they moved out to sit on a boat to continue their talk. Bui Kim thought about adding multiple costumes for characters. Ma Yang wanted to hire famous artists for the designs, but Bui Kim almost flipped the boat to stop him. He feared famous names might overshadow the game's identity, as Ma Yang figured Bui Kim just worried the artists would steal the spotlight and stunt the game's long-term growth. So Ma Yang wanted to find a lesser-known but talented artist. So Bui Kim had to block that too, reasoning that even if the skins looked great, the game would still be labelled trash, but would attract players anyway. Their close friendship almost distracted the boatman. In the end, Ma Yang decided to draw the designs himself, no cost. No capital spent. Their back and forth arguments nearly capsized the boat. What a mess, yet. Both remained on the boat while the boatman lost his focus. Together, they pulled him from the water and headed back to shore. Bui Kim revealed he had already found someone to handle the game skins. Then, he showed Ma Duong the artist's portfolio, someone who specialised in the quirky charm of chibi style. So, if you asked for realistic art, it definitely wouldn't turn out well, but Bui Kim believed this would create a unique masterpiece. They reached out to the artist, and Ma Duong took charge of negotiating, explaining they needed someone to draw skins for the game they were about to launch. The other side asked how many designs they needed and what the requirements were. Bui Kim stated he wanted 50 characters, each with 4 images, but absolutely no chibi style. The reason he avoided chibi: despite hiring a chibi artist, was because he saw immense untapped potential in this young man. Then, the artist quoted 2,000 for 4 images per character, which Ma Duong thought was too expensive, but Buikim felt that price was too low. He raised the offer to 3,500 per character. The system warned him this was over the top, so he adjusted the deal to include revision costs within that price. The young artist was entrusted with responsibility and encouragement from Buikim. Those words of support deeply touched this introverted creator's heart. Determined not to disappoint, the artist was surprised to find himself pressured by the client to raise prices. Buikim then asked Ma Duong to oversee and review the drawing process. Meanwhile, Buikim pondered the game's mechanics to ensure profit. He gathered with 2 copies of himself to discuss. The idea fewer in-game items, but priced at double the market value, while increasing the drop rates. Because if spinning for items felt too easy, players would get bored and quit the game. He then scoured the internet for game design templates, mostly overpriced, ugly, and outdated, and bought them all. Meanwhile, the artist's team had a meeting, unsure if these outlandish ideas were good or if they were just about to be ghosted and left unpaid. Then, the red-hatted young man revealed the deposit was already paid. So, no worries about getting ghosted. The client had prepaid for their custom designs, so they took this chance to unleash their full creative power. The team then made a pact to pour all their energy into meeting the deadline without betraying Buikim's trust. They worked relentlessly for days until the draft was finished and sent to Ma Duong for review. Ma Duong bent down and asked Buikim what to name the game. He randomly threw out a name and told Ma Duong to use it. Ma Duong next morning reported the game was running smoothly with no bugs, so Buikim added a painfully boring game description. Yet, the next day, Buikim stormed over to scold Ma Duong because the draft looked too good. How was he supposed to make a profit if it was this polished? He had only intended to hire an artist, set a tight deadline so they'd rush and produce mediocre results. But instead, he'd found a hidden master. He realised he should have just let them draw chibi from the start, since that was all they really did. Then he went back to his dorm feeling defeated when suddenly Ma Duong announced 100 downloads, but all the comments were bashing Buikim. He rushed to check and saw everyone complaining the music was boring, gameplay dull, and art not that special. Ma Duong thought Buikim was pushing himself hard to overcome this crisis. Not long after, the artist team heard about the game they had poured their hearts into. Coincidentally, beside them was a producer of a famous racing game. The red-hatted young man decided to download the game, to try it out because, after all, his work was inside it. He stayed up all night playing and realised his drawings were truly outstanding. Plus, spinning for characters was super easy. The only item in the game gave daily spins. He assumed this was just a test phase, so he called Ma Duong to ask. Ma Duong confirmed this was indeed the official version. Later, Buikim said he didn't plan to add more items in the game. Ma Duong guessed Buikim didn't want to milk players, but create a game with a conscience, letting players feel the joy of pulling rare cards. The red-hatted young man knew Buikim was sincere to this extent. That's why he didn't take extra money. Moreover, Ma Duong said Buikim was anxious, running out of funds for advertising. Hearing this, the red-hatted man hung up and decided to do something. He discussed with 2 roommates about how good Buikim was and resolved to help boost the game. At this point, Buikim realised the quarter end was near and the game was still losing money. He was headed for a loss. He knew he'd have to take the hit, no doubt about it. Then Ma Duong rushed in with exciting news. The game had exploded overnight with thousands of downloads and glowing reviews. Everyone praised the beautiful art and the fact it didn't milk players dry. Somehow players knew the art was beautiful. Even before playing it, turned out the artist's team had been spreading the word. Bui Kiem then called the red-hatted man, furious he was promoting the game. The artist had felt grateful to Bui Kiem and posted his art on a forum of experts. They highly praised him, immediately offering a job upon graduation and promising to help with promotion. Word spread from 10 to 100, and the game soared like a kite in the wind. Bui Kiem was bitter. I'm sure why, but couldn't blame anyone for free, so he just silently resented not earning a single extra dime from the system. On one side, the gloomy, rain-soaked air; on the other, the fresh, bright summer sunshine. Meanwhile, Ma Duong believed this comeback was exactly what Bui Kiem had planned all along. The big company was annoyed because they had sent people to trash-talk Bui Kiem's game, but now his game was about to surpass theirs. The company's CEO thought Bui Kiem's small studio was deliberately targeting them to overtake, so they became even more aggressive. The next day, Bui Kiem contacted the game store to request the game be taken down. The support staff had never heard of anyone wanting to remove a game so high on the trending charts. She planned to check with her supervisor, but the system flagged violations against Bui Kiem, forcing him to withdraw his request. He wanted to redo the conversion rate, but the system refused. The system finalized the accounts again, and the game had netted him over 200,000 in total. So, after the cut, he ended up earning only 2,000. The system has now entered its third round, boosting the capital to 500,000 and granting Bui Kiem 90 days to invest. This is the final limit, no more increases. But Bui Kiem knows one thing: losing money is no longer an option, because now he's investing in a new game. And no matter how disastrous it might be, the previous two games will still pull in enough income to break even. In the end, the system itself is the true winner here. Meanwhile, a large company has decided to buy Bui Kiem's firm. Sitting dejectedly at the training ground, he suddenly receives a call from Ma Duong. The biggest game corporation in the city is interested in buying their small company. The price is negotiable. Ma Duong is eager to sell since the offer is 50 million, but the system forbids him from doing so. The other side raises the price again, but Bui Kiem grits his teeth and refuses. Suddenly, an idea sparks in Bui Kiem's mind. The big company, furious at the rejection, is taken aback. To make matters worse, Bui Kiem demands to invest in their company, which makes the chairman think Bui Kiem is overestimating himself with just 2 games under his belt. Later, Bui Kiem and Ma Duong share a meal, and Ma Duong senses Bui Kiem's sorrow, though he's earned a decent sum from the games. Bui Kiem's sadness stems from not knowing how to actually lose his capital. The system grants an extra 500,000 plus, nearly 6 million in profit from the 2 games over 3 months. How on earth can he spend it all? Suddenly, Ma Duong insists on splitting the bill, but that consumes a third of his monthly salary. So Ma Duong wants to count this meal as company expenses. Suddenly, Bui Kiem realizes something and excuses himself for a moment. The waitress holds Ma Duong back, making sure someone pays the bill. Bui Kiem asks the system if Ma Duong's meal can be counted as company expenses, and it's allowed. But for Bui Kiem himself, not a chance. Back at the restaurant, Ma Duong is thrilled that his meal can be a company cost. Meanwhile, Bui Kiem suddenly comes up with the idea to expand the company with more people. That way, they'll have extra expenses, utilities, housing, salaries, and more. The only problem, neither of them knows how to start a company, so they decide to find someone who does the next day. At the rival game company, a woman named Lam Van has just submitted her resignation, seeking a work environment where she can truly grow. The next day, Bui Kiem and Ma Duong visit a recruitment agency. At first, the manager assumes they're students and offers some advice to find people on their own. But the moment he hears Bui Kiem's name, his attitude shifts instantly. After hearing their staff request, he understands Bui Kiem wants a secretary not too competent, someone to hold him back from spending too much. The manager then offers a candidate, and Bui Kiem seems pleased. On their way out, he notices a woman reading news about the card game he just developed. He tells her the game is boring, but she points out the heartfelt details the producer put into it. Realizing he can't convince her, Bui Kiem quietly leaves. Then, the manager asked the girl if she wanted to work here, but she said she wanted to learn more about the company that made this Three Kingdoms card game. Coincidentally, the person she loudly mentioned earlier, was actually the owner of that game company. She ran out hoping to catch Bui Kiem, but he had already left. The next day, Bui Kiem met with the secretary. The company had introduced her to him. Her name was Hilo, and after going over basic information, Bui Kiem only asked her to agree to one condition, that she would only make suggestions when he asked for her opinion. Otherwise, she had to stay silent and let him make all decisions. She accepted, knowing it was a fundamental rule of their craft. So they shook hands and began searching for a place to open the company. They settled on the priciest rental spot in the city, almost 700,000 dong a month. The landlord offered to lower the rent if Bui Kiem thought it was too steep, but Bui Kiem declined, saying that as a businessman, the landlord shouldn't concede too much, or there'd be no profit to make. After sealing the deal, he told the landlord to draw up the lease immediately. With the space secured, it was time to decorate and design the office. Bui Kiem wanted to splurge 2 million dong on interior design, but the system warned him to cut back to 800,000 dong. First, he wanted the workspace to have premium desks and chairs, top-tier computers with dual monitors, and greenery to cleanse the air. The guest room had to boast luxury furnishings and a classy tea set with rare teas, plus a dining room stocked with food and drinks. The conference room was arranged like a mini cinema. Hilo asked if he wanted a personal executive room, and he let her design it. She made it feel like a cozy home where he could live. So, a second home was born beyond the dorm. Hilo then showed Bui Kiem the hiring requirements. Some were too strict, so he cut a few, though those cuts risked ruining the recruitment. Deciding to personally interview and set salaries, Bui Kiem took the reins. Hilo suggested he buy a few suits to look sharp for clients or when meeting staff. Though, for personal use, it served the company's image, so the system approved the purchase. With the budget draining fast, Bui Kiem hoped this bleeding would continue. He realized he needed someone like Ma Duong again, and remembered a certain person. Bui Kiem headed to an internet cafe. There he sought a young man named Bao Huk, a college student who'd been expelled for skipping classes and now spent days grinding games online. He'd been living in that virtual world for 3 years. Bui Kiem approached Bao Huk, plainly inviting him to join the company as a game designer. Bao Huk wasn't interested at first, but Bui Kiem offered an advanced salary, saying that though Bao Huk lacked experience, no one knew games better than him. With company gear, Bao Huk could play freely. He gave Bao Huk time to think and left. After some contemplation, Bao Huk decided immediately. He'd descend the mountain now. Bui Kiem told him to use the advance for a fresh start and come to the office in 2 days. That night, Bui Kiem was thrilled to have recruited another talent like Ma Duong. The next morning, he woke late near noon, on a walk. He met a young man named Chu Huang who was there for an interview. Chu Huang didn't yet know Bui Kiem was the company owner. They talked casually. Bui Kiem reviewed Chu Huang's resume and found he had about 6 months of experience in the gaming industry. Suddenly, Chu Huang's boss came out of the elevators, demanding he return to work on time. Worried, Chu Huang knew his boss was scouting Bui Kiem's company and feared he might lose his chance. At Bui Kiem's office, everyone called him chairman. Shocking Chu Huang, Bui Kiem personally interviewed him. Though Chu Huang felt unworthy, Bui Kiem thought his resume looked solid. They discussed a salary and benefits. Chu Huang requested 2,000 dong monthly, but Bui Kiem calculated expenses and set the salary at 4,000 to cover living costs. Hearing this double pay compared to his old job, Chu Huang pledged full dedication but first had to resign from his previous company. After the interview, Hilo mentioned another girl. She refused to leave without meeting Bui Kiem. The girl rushed in, and Bui Kiem recognized her from before. She wanted to know if Bui Kiem's motivation for making games was profit. He denied it. Everything she questioned and thought about him was confirmed true. Hilo added that this girl, Lam Van, was often at risk of layoffs in her old company. Bui Kiem decided to hire her immediately. While Lam Van joined the team, Tu Huang returned to his old job. His boss mocked him for dreaming of Bui Kiem's company, but Tu Huang revealed he had been accepted and explained why the boss was rejected. Meanwhile, Bui Kiem's dorm friends wondered where he'd been lately. They couldn't understand why he avoided their usual fun to wander outside. Asking Maduong, they learned Bui Kiem was working a side job elsewhere. Everyone in the dorm was hooked on the card game Bui Kiem created, collecting cards obsessively. At the company, staff did little but play games, though Lam Van thought they were gaining experience and fresh ideas for future projects. No one knew where Bui Kiem was since the hiring began. He rarely showed up at the office. Everyone assumed he was exploring ways to grow the company, but in truth, he was somewhere retreating to recharge. Yet now, Bui Kiem was searching for a risky path to save the company from collapse. And then an idea sparked within him. Today, the whole company was weighed down by the dullness of having no real work to do. Just as the clock neared quitting time, Bui Kiem appeared before everyone. I'm sure everyone wondered where he had been all week. He wasn't just sitting idle, he was out hunting for inspiration to breathe life into the company. The idea he landed on, they would create a first-person shooter game. He wanted the team to dive headfirst into every genre, to test their wings in every field possible, free from chains and full of creative liberty. That's exactly why he handpicked these people. Instead of seasoned veterans locked in their comfort zones, he chose these talents to unleash their creativity and grow beyond limits, unlike the old guard who'd been boxed in by their experience. Because those veterans would only play it safe inside their protective bubbles. Then, he started rallying the troops from Bao Huk to Tu Huang, urging everyone to push their boundaries. Everyone agreed with this vision. He then summoned Bao Huk and Tu Huang to the meeting room. Laying down the game's commandments, it mustn't be too hard. The story must be rich and deep. And thirdly, the gun skins must be so stunning players would gladly spend money on them. But Tio Huang argued first-person shooters are usually for the pros. If it's too easy, players will complain. Besides, shooters these days rarely focus on storylines. In fact, their previous game barely sold any items, and now adding gun skins might just invite the community's wrath. But Bui Kiem brushed off all that noise. They wouldn't follow the crowd, they'd carve their own path. He gave them 1 week to produce a rough draft, appointing both as project leads for this venture. After everyone left, Bui Kiem felt a spark of amusement. Being a boss meant giving orders and watching the magic happen. Then he left too, noticing the office was empty. Overtime simply didn't exist here. Bao Huk lingered behind to fool around, so he let it slide. But Bao Huk was hiding the fact that Tu Huang had also stayed late, quietly grinding so the team wouldn't bear the burden of late-night work. Tu Huang was still stuck, unable to craft a compelling story. Bao Huk already had an idea brewing. Up to now, Bui Kiem always pushed for the best product with the least resources, so story was not their first priority. What they needed to nail first was the game's setting. Bao Huk suggested a small offshore oil rig as the backdrop. This would naturally limit scenery and map size. Next, what would they face up there? Bao Huk proposed zombies enough challenge, but not overwhelming. Ticking the first box Bui Kiem set, they'd focus on perfecting shooting mechanics and item collection, ensuring even the most picky gamers wouldn't find faults. The two then tested a bit of zombie shooting and frantic escapes, but the question remained what story would fit this setting. Bao Huk thought of a little red-hooded girl silent, unable to speak, sidestepping the need for voice actors. She'd communicate through eye gestures, prompting players to interpret her signals and decide their next move. weaving puzzles into the gameplay and deepening player engagement. The little girl guided them toward the higher tier items, slowly winning their trust. The basics were set, and through Baohuk's insight, Xiao Huang finally understood why Baohuk was granted the privilege to stay at the company. The two then stayed up all night discussing gun skins and high-level items they could add to the game. Bit by bit, they had started to fulfill the 3 criteria set by Bui Kim. Now, all they needed was to write the descriptions and hand them over to Team 5 for review. Just then, Ma Dong arrived at the company and spotted Xiao Huang still there. He immediately knew Xiao Huang had been sneaking in extra hours after work. In the days that followed, Xiao Huang kept working overtime in secret, believing they had to finish early to have time for testing and fixing bugs since Bui Kim's schedule left no room for this. Xiao Huang still needed some advice from Baohuk, who launched into a long explanation that left Xiao Huang completely lost. So, Baohuk found a similar game to demonstrate the ideas more clearly. Ma Dong secretly watched all this and saw Xiao Huang sneaking in overtime again the next day. At school, Ma Dong reported to Bui Kim about Xiao Huang's frequent late stays at the company. At that moment, Bui Kim also received the game design documents from the other group. After reviewing, he found their ideas quite good and approved them. About Xiao Huang's secret overtime. He initially planned to skip class and handle the matter, but when he heard that Xiao Huang was just playing games during overtime, Bui Kim turned back to class. Meanwhile, the other team, hearing their designs were approved, began pushing hard for the next stage. That evening, while Bui Kim was showering, he pondered how to reduce revenue from the previous 2 games, but couldn't find a way to take them down. Suddenly, Ma Dong came to inform him that everyone was pulling overtime together. Ma Dong said they were working overtime just to play the game. So, Bui Kim decided to pay for their extra hours. He asked Ma Dong to track their overtime so they could be compensated the next morning. Bui Kim was flooded with design reports, but decided to let them handle things themselves. He couldn't get through all of it anyway. Later, hearing food delivery arrive, he opted to have lunch served right at the office. He offered free meals to the staff, with dishes fit for royalty. On top of that, he set up a gym room and hired 2 fitness coaches for those who wanted to eat well but stay in shape. Xiao Huang wondered aloud to Lam Van if their treatment was too generous, and that the work hours were very relaxed. They all found Bui Kim's approach strangely generous, but to them, these reasons made a boss like Bui Kim truly precious when they received their overtime pay. Lam Van went on behalf of everyone to find Bui Kim. They tried to return the overtime money, explaining they hadn't worked extra just for the pay, but Bui Kim refused to take it back, telling them to feel free to work overtime as they wished he never forced anyone. Lam Van couldn't refuse the money, so she left quietly, and everyone was deeply moved that such a boss still existed. Afterwards, Bui Kim called Baohuk over. He questioned Baohuk about making a game using too few resources. Baohuk explained he used the minimum possible, forcing Bui Kim to remind him of the goal they set. Their goal was to create a perfect game, and to achieve that, they shouldn't be stingy but use every resource available. Baohuk suggested buying their own servers instead of renting another way to invest money, but right then, the big rival company started plotting against Bui Kim's staff. Meanwhile, Baohuk was struggling to figure out how to explain the plan to everyone at the company. People kept coming with questions about issues in the plan, and Baohuk was overwhelmed, unable to answer anything clearly. But Xiao Huang, the trustworthy junior, stepped up to handle the chaos. He gave clear orders to each person and managed to resolve many of the problems they faced. After some time, Bui Kim was present in class, fully prepared, so the teacher couldn't fault him or fail him. But today, Ma Dong was absent. Suddenly, Ma Dong called to report that the rival company was trying to poach people from Bui Games' team. He rushed to the company, only to find it deserted. The office was a mess, and Baohuk's name tag was in the trash. Bu Kiem thought Bao Huk had left to join the big corporation, and with only 1 month left to finish the game, he wondered if they could make it in time. Suddenly, everyone returned. Bao Huk wondered why Bu Kiem was there, while Bu Kiem was puzzled that they were still around despite having offers from the rival company. But they all refused, saying this place offered a far better environment than anywhere else. The team had bonded tightly and didn't want to leave. As for the messy office, Bao Huk had just finished the test run and was celebrating a bit too hard. They had gathered in the meeting room to watch the demo and forgot to clean up. Hold on, let's talk about why everyone stayed. Bu Kiem was shocked that the test run was completed so soon. They brought him into the meeting room to watch. It looked decent, running well, though only average, not quite a masterpiece. But the test run felt premature, and he still wanted to find ways to spend more money. Then he came up with the idea of team building. They'd take a few days off for a trip, and suddenly, an uncle from the rival company showed up. This man had been trying to lure their staff away, so few welcomed him warmly. He came seeking a position at Bu Kiem's company, boasting how the rival chairman had always undermined Bu Kiem. Bu Kiem saw him as a benefactor, helping him spend money, but couldn't accept the uncle because no one liked him, so he declined. Then Bao Huk discussed the upcoming trip, and Lam Van wanted to revisit their old company. Bu Kiem agreed and let them visit the rival company to see its working environment. His goal was to show them how good that place was, to discourage them and drop productivity here. But Lam Van suspected Bu Kiem wanted to learn more about her since it was her old company. A few days later, the whole team went out to a small restaurant. Bu Kiem told them to spend freely and keep receipts for him to pay. He wondered why, despite the big budget, they chose such a modest place. At that moment, the director of the rival company received news that Bu Kiem's team was coming to visit. So, they sent someone out to welcome them. Neither side wanted to reveal the previous deal of buying 10 people. Then, Bu Kiem's whole group was invited inside. Everyone noticed this place was quite large and seemed expensive. Stepping into this grand scale, Bu Kiem decided he had to learn a thing or two. Knowledge to fuel his own expansion and investments in the future. Soon, he was led to meet the company's director. Neither side really knew much about each other yet, so the assistant took over all the introductions. The director felt a bit awkward facing Bu Kiem, dressed sharp and surprisingly young. Deciding to break the ice, he offered to show Bu Kiem around, but first, he wanted to gift a product from their company. Afterwards, he met up with the others, who all shared that the working environment there was even worse than Bu Kiem's own company. The computers were just average at best. The staff were crowded together with no spacious areas like Bu Kiem's place. Crafting equipment looked old and worn, while the displays seemed well invested, but the workplace itself felt neglected. Food was limited to biscuits and tea, not the full spread like at Bu Kiem's company. Though the criticisms piled up, the director listened but grew visibly annoyed. Then, he recognized Lam Van, surprised that she chose to send Tuong Lai into a startup company. But since things had already gotten tense, he cut to the chase and started asking questions to learn more. The staff from both sides sat down at one table and began. Duong was tasked with diplomacy. He wondered how they were working overtime on a Saturday, assuming overtime pay here must be generous. But their staff had never even heard of overtime pay. Bu Kiem had to give Duong a warning he was poking fun rather than asking proper questions. Then, the assistant came over, sneering and digging at Lam Van. So Bu Kiem stepped in to save her face. He introduced her as the general manager of his side and invited her to speak. She stood up and praised Bu Kiem, hinting at the hidden meanings he embedded in the games from racing to card games. She said he always went against the grain and achieved unexpected success. Of course, this was all her exaggeration. Bu Kiem hadn't even dreamed up such grand plans. Everyone said he worked without caring about profit. And honestly, He barely made any money from those games. The director knew if Bui Kiem couldn't brag, he'd be looked down on, so he had to talk big. The assistant refused to reveal details since the project wasn't launched yet, but the director thought it would be out in half a month, so they might as well share it with these colleagues for reference. Besides, their company was big if copied. The public would side with them. The director then introduced an upcoming shooting game. Its gameplay wouldn't be easy. It was designed for experienced players only. Plus, the gun skins would mimic real-life designs to satisfy military enthusiasts. Most importantly, the game would be free to download, with profits made later through in-game items. Touhang saw their product was truly inferior in every way. Simply having a game storyline wasn't enough to beat this side. Everyone glanced at Bui Kiem, who kept smiling, so they guessed he already had a plan up his sleeve. That smile wasn't just confidence, it was the calm before a storm. In that moment, you could feel the silent promise no matter how fierce the challenge. Bui Kiem was ready to turn the tides. But, in truth, he had crafted a game with a goal that went against the majority's tide, believing that their game would inevitably make the rival's project suffer losses. Everyone ended up cheering for Bui Kiem, while the director quietly smiled at this outcome. When launched, Bui Kiem's side would surely have to bow out, admitting defeat and marvelling at the rival's talent. Yet, Xiao Huang noticed Bui Kiem still smiling, as if hiding something deeper. His knowledge surpassed even that of the director. Upon returning, they were rewarded with 5 days of paid leave. But Xiao Huang stood up and suggested they hadn't yet grasped the hidden message Bui Kiem was sending through this trip. Undoubtedly, Bui Kiem was using this trip to remind them just how formidable their competitor truly was. Despite the rival's poor employee benefits, their product outshone theirs in every way, signalling that complacency was a dangerous trap. Even after finishing their project, they had been treated well, so their results had to match that generosity. United in this resolve, they vowed to defeat the opponent. The chairman later scolded the director for prematurely revealing their product, but the director believed he couldn't let the company lose face. Confident their product wouldn't fall behind Bui Kiem's and that their downloads would surpass theirs. The next day, Bui Kiem asked his assistant if AI had taken their leave yet. She assured him that everything was under control. AI thought he was off promoting the game somewhere and kept pushing forward. Baocook began composing music for the game. Every time he played a piece, AI praised it as perfect. Days later, Bui Kiem checked the